I come from a very kind of international background, and I think I've been unafraid of hopping across different geographies and careers and functions within companies, having a constant curiosity, whether I'm, learning a new language or trying to figure something out at work to the deepest level and really understand how it works. I think it has been the thing that has really helped me and also helped me succeed every time I've jumped in between roles or in between careers, never being afraid to learn something new and having confidence in myself that no matter the challenge, I'll probably figure it out. If I think about the different phases in my career at the beginning, what I'm really grateful for is having an incredible manager, right? The person who was right above me and really actually focused on teaching me core skills. Every time you transition into a new role, you need that very strong manager that's really staying close to you and actually downloading everything they know and giving you constant feedback so that you can ramp up. And then I think once you're comfortable in a role, and also the later you get into your career, it's really up to you to carve your own career path based on kind of what your personal ambitions are, what else is going on in your life, and where you want to take your career. So I think it's, being very practical and pragmatic and clear in your communication. It also goes a long way when you're, building a working relationship with somebody.
Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. This show aims to inspire and equip you with the tools you need to navigate your career plans. FemLead brings inspiring career perspectives and strategies to guide your path to success. Your host, Alexandra, will interview role models on new exciting topics with each episode. If you like what you hear, give us a review and subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of FemLead Podcast. We have a new cool guest today. She's a friend, an advisor, and a very energetic person. And I'm super excited that today she chose to join us at FemLead because I think you will learn a lot and you will be very inspired. Violeta Todorova is one of our friends here at FemLead Podcast, a strategic advisor, but also currently the chief of staff at Monta, a scale-up founded in Denmark which recently raised 80 million euros in Series B fundraising. Monta is the software solution that is empowering drivers and businesses to transition to electrical vehicles. Before diving into entrepreneurship, Violeta was a project leader at Boston Consulting Group in Copenhagen, and previously she spent 5 years at one of the largest marketing and communication companies, Publicis Groupe, working across clients such as Samsung and Heineken. Violeta has an MBA from INSEAD and a bachelor's from King's College London, and knowing her personally, I know she loves to dance salsa, she loves to cook Italian food, and she also volunteers for community efforts. As I said, she's also a strategic advisor for FemLead, and it is really my pleasure to welcome her today to discuss her impressive career and share a little bit of her wisdom with you here today. So without further ado, please welcome Violeta, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Welcome, Violeta. It's a pleasure to have you here at FemLead Podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually quite excited that we do this finally. We know each other for a while, and we've also we've been a guest at our conference. You advise us strategically on our family plans, and also we are preparing now an event together with Monta. Yes. And you have been a great promoter of our work. And we were just chatting that perhaps you are our next guest because you have so many pieces of advice to share. And I would love for you to be spotlighted as one of our role models, because there's so much that I learned from you, and I think everybody should. So I'm very, very, very excited. Thank you for joining us. It's a nice Saturday, and
yes,
we're
I think it's one of the first sunny Saturdays in a while. So I'm taking advantage of it with the sun.
Yes. And let's talk a little bit about your setup now, because I introduced you and I shared a little bit about your career setup, but I want to know if you can share more about your journey into the world of business and strategy and marketing as well. And I want to know what basically inspired you to pursue a career in this field, and how did you move to Copenhagen and got started?
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a very long-winded story because I come from a very kind of international background, and I think I've been unafraid of kind of hopping across different geographies and careers and functions within companies. So if we go kind of back to university, I actually did film studies because at the time I wanted to be a movie director. And after doing a couple internships, I decided that, perhaps it wasn't for me. And I still wanted something that was creative, but I was kind of missing some more analytics and business driven decisions. And that's actually how I landed on marketing. It was, storytelling and building brands and being able to think outside of the box. But at the end of the day, you kind of had to deliver certain numbers and ROI on the marketing spend. And it was very data driven. It was the time when a lot of budget was being shifted from more traditional channels to digital channels, which were much more real time and data driven. And that kind of launched me into kind of being very fascinated by the world of technology and how that intersects with human behaviors, and then kind of how it affects businesses. And I spent 5 years at Publicis Groupe across their London and New York office. I worked a little bit with startups and ad tech companies in London. And then I did big tech when I was in New York, kind of helping with our Google Cloud partnership. And after kind of living in the US for 2 years, I decided that, long term, I saw myself establishing myself in Europe. And so I moved back to Europe, to France, to do my MBA at INSEAD. And then from there, transitioned to BCG in Copenhagen. And I've been in Copenhagen ever since. So that's 3.5 years now. I spent 3 years at BCG in their Copenhagen office and then joined Monta in July of last summer. And while at BCG, I did, a variety of different projects, again, kind of pulling from my digital and marketing experience. And now at Monta, I would say I do a little bit of everything, but primarily kind of looking at strategy and operations.
I'm very, very curious about your role at Monta because a chief of staff is a very interesting role. A lot of people do not know what it means, and I'm happy that we get to talk about it because I'd love to know, how does your day-to-day look like? What is your focus? And because you do a little bit of everything, how do you actually plan and prioritize what needs to be delivered? How do you create that context of like, okay, this is what my role will entail this month, for example?
Mm-hmm. So I think the role of chief of staff means something different in every organization. Like small startups probably require something different than bigger companies. Even Google or Sequoia Capital have chief of staff. And I read a great article which kind of explained it as kind of 3 different levels. So, the first level is more administrative tasks, managing the communication flow to the CEO or the person that you represent. Then level 2 is really kind of running projects on behalf of the C-level person. So kind of being a bit more of a strategic project manager. And then level 3 is kind of being a full part of the C-level team, traveling with them, helping drive strategic decisions, potentially overseeing a team that does some of the other tasks that I talked about. And I probably started more at the level 2 when I joined Monta. And now that I've hired an additional kind of 3 people on my team and will expand to 4 this year, I think I'm moving more towards kind of the level 3. And I'm definitely, a full part of the C level, which is something I was looking for when I was looking at chief of staff roles because I knew it varied so much. I wanted to make sure that I was, positioning myself in a strategically important role that didn't really focus on administrative tasks. And I think, if I look at my day to day, it probably does focus on, company building at the highest level. So, setting our company strategy for, how we communicate it to the board, setting our company KPIs, looking at department performances, helping departments improve their performance and their efficiencies, running the 12 strategic initiatives that we have internally, both in terms of our go-to-market and internal kind of people and processes. So no 2 days really look alike, which is also why I like this role. But I think on the whole, it's really focused on kind of making the company better and kind of addressing any pain points that arise as we scale, which I think is, the biggest value add in a startup environment is you're changing and growing so fast and you need those additional resources to help scale along the journey.
And like you said, no one day looks the same. So is there a particular, let's say, period that you prefer based on the experience you've had so far? Is it the fundraising period? Is it the hiring period where you focus a lot on building up the team? Do you have a preference? Has there been like a period of weeks where you were like, this is really, really cool that I'm doing this as chief of staff?
So I did enjoy the fundraising period in terms of learning, and it's always really fun to be challenged by investors in terms of, your numbers and where you're headed. And you really get to think long term and visionary around kind of fundraising, because it's about looking at kind of what the next 5 to 10 years look like. But probably my favorite is really focused on company building. So around, November, December, we have our kind of annual 2-day strategy session with the board, where we kind of set the strategy for the year and really talk about what's important to get us from where we are to where we need to be next December. And that part I really enjoyed, because it, talks about, okay, who do we need to hire, and do we need to rethink the structure of the company? What products do we need to launch? How is that connected to our go-to-market? And so I like the fact that, you work individually on different pieces, and then the story needs to come together to form one puzzle around kind of what are you really focusing on next year. And I think that's the hardest part as a startup, is knowing what to focus on and to prioritize. And I really liked that part.
Fantastic. And when it comes to your career journey, because you worked in BCG before and you worked in Publicis, and you've had a couple of experiences where different periods of time have given you different sort of skill sets, right? Like you learned a little bit about partnerships, a little bit about strategy, and then you actually went full into becoming a consultant at BCG specifically. And that's a tough job. I think that in general, working in management consulting, you learn a lot, but you also need to focus a lot in the delivering the project. When it comes to strategic challenges and also the junction between having a rewarding but a challenging period as well. How did you approach drawing from your expertise in strategy consulting and business leadership, and what did you learn from passing through challenging and rewarding periods as part of your career?
So I think that the question boils down to, what do I really feel that I learned at BCG or while I was in consulting, and how I think that's going to help me now in my current role. And I think the thing that probably I learned and really appreciate now is the ability to take what feels like an obscure, abstract problem and really break it down into sizable chunks that make logical sense, and then using that logic and that structure to get the rest of the organization to help you essentially, either drive a project forward or go through a transition period. And I think that part, really helped me at BCG when, you were asked questions like, okay, should we acquire this company, or, we need to reduce our costs by this percentage, get, everyone in the organization on board. And I think you really start to understand how to break down problems and then communicate it outward to many different types of audiences across different seniorities, and kind of tailor the messaging to them, and then kind of, going and getting it done. I think it's also a very iterative process building a strategy. I think sometimes people think, okay, you just read a lot or think a lot and then you come up with a strategy, and that's absolutely not how it works. It's also the same as like the lean startup. You come up with a first framework, and then you show it to some people, and then you tweak it, and then you show it to an expert, and you tweak it again, and then you try out something, and then it doesn't work, and then you tweak it again. And so I think that mentality of a strategy isn't always perfect the first time around, and it actually takes a lot of iterations. And being in that environment where you're constantly iterating on strategy, I think has really kind of helped me now address, some of the pain points we feel as a business, or even some of the projects that I'm leading that usually start out a bit abstract. And then, usually the first thing I do is break it down so that it's in sizable chunks that make sense to people, and we can align on, deliverables and timelines and who needs to be involved and all that stuff.
Very good. And when it comes to, I wanna ask you more about it, because I find it really fascinating. And also, you've helped us at FemLead with similar situations. You've joined our strategy day, and one of the things that I mentioned about you to everyone I meet is the fact that Violeta is so focused on getting to the point, as in how can we get to the sizable chunk, like you said, of the problem, so that we can solve it or that we can plan for it. When it comes to our listeners that are thinking how to apply critical thinking and this iterative process in their life, Is there any sort of advice or any sort of realization you've had after doing this for so many years when it comes to our mindset? How do we think about problems? Do you feel like it's a situation where there's a recipe or some sort of approach in order to make our situation a little bit more easy or easier when it comes to planning? Is there something that you found out from the process that people can apply in their lives or in their careers or in planning their situation?
So I think, process gets you so far, but I think, really understanding the content and allowing yourself the time to develop that muscle is probably the key piece of advice here. And it's something that, I always try to learn from people that are more senior than me. And it's definitely something that I immediately recognize, right? And somebody that has been doing a job for longer than me is their ability to actually pick up on what is important and what's not important is like very fast and very on point and very impressive. And it's something, for instance, I really admire about the CEO of Monta, who I work with closely. We have this dashboard where there's maybe 15, 20 different KPIs. And he can look at that dashboard any day and tell me, which one changed and why that important, why that change is important for us today. And I think really understanding, those numbers and what it means and why it's significant to the rest of the business. It's just also a muscle, right, that I'm trying to develop, but I also know that I'm not quite at the level that, that he is. And so I think there's also something around just listening to senior people on the team, right? What are they concerned about? What are they focusing on? And really kind of learning from that to kind of hone in what you were worried about. And sometimes I do retrospectives, right? When a project finishes, and I think to myself, I was worried about X, Y, and Z. Did those things actually go sideways? What went sideways? If I was to do this project again, what would I actually be worried about this time? And asking along the way, right? Like the people who are supervising you or more senior, right? Is there something that I have not mentioned that you are concerned about? And I think that's another way to kind of get that feedback from somebody that is a bit more senior than you and probably has an eye for this much faster than you do.
Fantastic. It's actually a great piece of advice to listen and look for mentorship, because I think that somehow, depending on where you're situated in your career or in your life, it's not necessarily easy to find that context to have a mentor or to ask for mentorship. But actually, what you're also sharing is the fact that there are skills that you have to develop, and there are people that you can, work with closely that you can learn from, but you also are aware of, what are those areas of improvement that you would like for yourself. And I think, there's a mix between having the opportunity, but also knowing what you want for yourself, how to develop a certain skill or how to become better at a certain skill set that it's really key here. And it's always a mix between what opportunities you have versus what you should choose to focus your energy in. And I think it's really important for people to take this as a key piece of advice, that it's a mix and it's never straightforward. It's always based on what you at the moment feel you want to improve on. And on that note, is there any sort of, let's say, particular skill that you think has helped you in your career, being it strategic thinking or being it, having the opportunity to build relationships? Is there any, when you think about Violeta and you say, Violeta succeeded because, is there a skill that you would highlight?
I would probably say that I'm very curious and I love learning. And I think that's definitely helped me also because I've changed roles. And I think even if you stay in the same industry, assuming you get promoted and progress, right, the nature of your role changes. And therefore you need to become curious and learn how to manage people or how to do more strategy or, how to build partnerships or how to renegotiate contracts, whatever it may be. And I think having a constant curiosity, whether I'm, learning a new language or trying to figure something out at work to the deepest level and really understand how it works, I think has, been the thing that has really helped me and also helped me succeed every time I've kind of jumped in between roles or in between careers, is that, never being afraid to learn something new. And having confidence in myself that no matter the challenge, I'll probably figure it out.
That's fantastic. That's really good. And I'm happy you mentioned confidence, because especially for our female listener, I feel that sometimes the confidence to believe in yourself and to know that you will figure it out, it's not necessarily a given. So having a role model that tells you directly, look, I had confidence, I can learn this, even though I wasn't an expert in the beginning. I really want this to be highlighted in this interview, that it's, you can try, and there are so many, opportunities to succeed. And I really hope that the listeners will take this as a key, highlight from this interview, that it's great to believe in yourself and to have this confidence, and it really impacts your setup, right? Because you also have these opportunities to thrive even more. I'm really happy you mentioned that.
Yeah, and sorry, just I think also connecting it to what you said earlier around mentorship. I think if I think about the different phases in my career, at the beginning, what I'm really grateful for is having an incredible manager, right? The person who was right above me and really actually focused on teaching me core skills, be it, sending an email or building my first Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is. And I think every time you transition into a new role, you need that very strong manager that's really staying close to you and actually downloading everything they know and giving you constant feedback so that you can ramp up. And then I think once you're comfortable in a role, and also the later you get into your career, it's not always about mentorship. This is where I kind of separate mentorship and sponsorship. I think then you want to look for sponsorship in organizations, and it's, you have confidence, you can learn, and you have certain skills to bring. And you need somebody else in the organization that sees that in you and opens doors for you and, paves a path for you to try doing things in your own way and succeeding and failing and learning on your own. And I think that's something that, retrospectively, I've thought a lot about, is that, in the beginning, you don't have a lot of skills. You're mainly just potential and hopefully a great attitude. And you need that person, directly above you to really help you get to a certain point. And then once you kind of pass that point, it's really up to you to carve your own career path based on kind of what your personal ambitions are, what else is going on in your life, and where you want to take your career. And then having, sponsorship and inspiration is what's really important.
I love that you said that. We have a full episode on sponsorship, so for everybody, we can go back and also listen to that one. It's so important to have not only mentorship, like you said, but also sponsorship within the organization, being it a small startup, being it a corporate, being it a VC firm. It's very important that someone sees, what are your top skills and how you work, and then promotes opportunities or promotes you as a person that can do it. And then, of course, it's up to you to create that context and to have that successful setup. But it's so important to create those relationships. And speaking of relationships, one of my next questions is about, how do you approach relationship building in your role, and what strategies did you find to be, most effective in fostering long-term partnerships that, of course, will drive business success?
Yes. So I think a few things. One is building trust. And I think the way you build trust is you get stuff done, you follow through, you manage deliverables, you manage expectations. That's how you build trust with somebody, so that they give you, bigger pieces of work and come to you, for be it advice or a project or something special, etc. And then I think the other thing is, being very personable and approachable. So kind of getting to know people, outside of work, and being able to laugh with them, and, showing up to the Friday bars and really hanging out with your colleagues, I think also builds, a great relationship. And then I think the third thing would probably be, I don't know why, I think I always have to have three things now that I've worked in consulting, right? You're just trained to always have three things. I think the third thing is always to make it, mutually beneficial. So there's a reason it's a relationship. It's that, you need to be adding value, and it's, similar to what we were talking about with mentorship. It's not a one-way thing where you just receive and you don't give anything back. I think you always need to be mindful of the other person's time and what their intentions are and what their KPIs and goals are. and then kind of helping them succeed as well as your own role. And I think especially, again, a little bit going back to building trust, but maybe this is a fourth bucket. When working with senior people or like your direct manager, I think the way, you build a really strong relationship is by very clear action-oriented communication, right? So I spotted a problem, I thought about it, I have 3 solutions, I have a recommendation, and then kind of, that drives directly into a conversation that is very productive. And I think, whoever you're talking with is automatically, gaining trust and building a relationship with you, as opposed to just, complaining or saying, okay, I spotted this thing, it's not really working, I just wanted to flag it. It's a little bit less of a helpful, start to a relationship. So I think it's, being very practical and pragmatic and clear in your communication also goes a long way when you're, building a working relationship with somebody.
Mm-hmm. And it's also about, you mentioned this, but it really boils down to solving problems. Because like you said, just thinking about it and then saying, and then thinking about it, saying, and potentially also suggesting a solution is not the same as actually doing your homework, going back and saying, okay, I found this problem, I thought about it, I actually put down some ideas, and then I actually thought what would make most sense for us in this context. Mm-hmm. That entire process, it goes such a long way, like you said, because it's about, I'm here to solve this problem, I'm not here to put more work on your plate. And
exactly.
on that note, I really want to say that one of my personal learnings in leadership and working with senior stakeholders is that in the beginning, maybe I thought the fact that I could see problems was really cool and really good for the business or for the setup. But then I didn't know how much more, stress and honestly just work I put on someone else's plate if I just say it, if I don't actually try to work towards finding a solution. And if there's anything I learned also in working now in corporate for a while, is that no one wants more work. Everybody wants to have an efficient outcome of how they spend their time and how they work. So if I go there without solutions, or if I go there without an attitude of like, we can solve this, I'm working on the best I'm working on the best setup, I'm honestly just putting more work on their plate, and no one wants more work on their plate, Yeah. So I think it's a very good point to also consider how you build those relationships in the sense that you are also there to solve problems and not just to flag things. It was a big lesson for me. I want to talk about success next, and successful mindset, because success is individual. It's a personal setup that we build for ourselves. You have your own goals, and what you define as success is probably different than what I define as success. But I do want to talk a little bit about how do you define a successful mindset and your successful mindset. And also, you work in a very fast-paced industry now, working in startups. You worked previously in consulting where you had projects to deliver every few months. So how do you incorporate, your key traits into this environment, and what would you say are the most important traits to be aware of when you want to have a successful endeavor or build up a successful mindset?
Yeah. So I think when maybe a couple of years ago, my definition of success was setting ambitious goals and achieving them, and I think that was, it was success for me because it drove me. I had a clear path. I kind of saw something that was ahead of me. It was ambitious, and, I could kind of work towards it day in, day out. And I think there I was really fascinated with the concept of, daily habits. So, working towards a healthier lifestyle or training for a marathon, something that required a long time with a lot of, consecutive persistence in order to achieve that goal. And to me, that was, success, because it meant that I worked at something for a very long time, and ultimately I saw the results or achieved a certain goal. And I've also always been a person who really loved, New Year's resolutions and then tracking those during the year and making sure they're smart. So for a long time, one of my key definitions of success was really kind of hitting certain milestones with a level of efficiency and caliber in the things that I did. I think most recently, and actually this connects a little bit to how you and I met, Anda, right, through the personal coach, is I started reading Brené Brown's book and kind of daring to lead and learning how to be vulnerable and much more kind of reflective and kind to yourself. And I probably realized that all this kind of goal setting and being really harsh with myself in terms of when I didn't hit a goal was maybe, not the best way forward. And so then my definition of success, kind of changed, and it was a bit more holistic in terms of, am I being a balanced individual who's happy with, all parts of their life? Am I able to take a step back and really reflect in terms of, what am I doing at work, and does it bring me joy? And, is it giving me energy? And I think now I concentrate much more on the concept of kind of, energy and joy, and making sure that, the things in my life fill me with energy and joy. And to me, that's much more of a successful day now, as opposed to, okay, today I did 4 things that get me closer to my goal.
Fantastic. I love the fact that you said how you learn not to be harsh on yourself. I feel that a lot of women that want to be successful believe that being harsh on yourself will increase the chances of success, because it kind of builds you up for everything that could come your way. And I'm happy you mentioned it, because it's also a reflection of mine that the more you are, the harder you are on yourself, and the more you think that you have to achieve everything, the less you leave space for opportunities to kind of take you in new places. And this was something that I really had to learn how to kind of let go of, and still be ambitious, but not obsess over a certain way of doing things. And I feel like once I realized how that works, and once I realized, how to let go of that particular idea of success, things just happen more naturally, and they also happen for the better. Like nothing changed in terms of successful endeavors, but my relationship with how success looks like really changed. And I think that's a great outcome of this question, to consider how you actually think about yourself when it comes to those successful milestones, and whether you maybe have some goals because you think you should have them, but actually it's not really what's making you feeling fulfilled or feeling happy, right? So it's a very interesting experience to kind of think about it and then change your mind about it.
And I also think, your definition of success changes so much during the course of your life. And, I think you can be very goal setting, like I was a couple of years ago, because I was in excellent health and I had excellent conditions around me. And so it was very easy to have, those kinds of goals. And, I've also watched a few documentaries now about, people who maybe have gone through a bit more traumatic things. And to them, success might mean like, I wake up and I get out of bed and, I manage to take 5 steps, or, I make it out of the house. And then the next day I push myself a little bit further. And that really kind of, again, changed my perspective on success, that, even the smallest things, or, today success looks like being kind to myself, is also an equally valid, goal to achieve, as is, going to the gym every day this week.
Absolutely. I'm really curious how you maintain motivation. I'm really curious because you also have a very, I'd say, energetic attitude in general. Like, I don't think I've met you once for coffee and you're completely like out of energy. So I wonder, when it comes to, especially when you have setbacks, because I imagine, especially with the new role and you're working in consulting previously and so on, there must have been moments where it wasn't really easy or necessarily easy going with your setup. How do you maintain motivation, and also how do you bounce back after you have setbacks?
So you're right. On the general, I feel like I'm a very bubbly, energetic person. It tends to come up in performance reviews. The word, enthusiastic or energy is a word that a lot of people use to describe me. And I don't know. I think, of course, I have, bad days or days where I'm really frustrated. And I think, of course, I also feel that, I'm the kind of person who wears their heart on their sleeve. So people around me at work definitely know that I'm very frustrated today and things are not going exactly as they should. But I also think that enables me to kind of get my frustration out and then, next day show up and, have a new attitude as opposed to bottling it up and then kind of holding resentment for many days. I think I'm just like, okay, I'm going to like feel really frustrated today, or I'm going to feel very down. So I'm going to like go home and watch 5 episodes of Love is Blind. And the next morning I'm going to wake up and like be excited again. And so I think it's, yeah, I also like to think that every day is, a new opportunity to pick yourself up or try something new and approach it in a new way, right? And I think it also goes back to my mindset of being curious and learning. So usually if something doesn't go well, I might get frustrated, and then I have my day of being frustrated, and the next day I'm like, okay, well, what was in my control and what would I do differently? And like, this is an opportunity to try and learn something. So why not give it a try? And I think it also goes to like, I forget when it was earlier in this conversation, we talked about it. Maybe it was around kind of building relationships. I think, one way that you can really build relationships with everyone in the company is to be very good at whatever it is you are assigned to do. And, no matter how big or small the task. And so sometimes I have, really small tasks that also frustrate me. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, this has been assigned to me and I'm going to rock this task, even if it's like finding a calendar slot to send an invite, like I will do it. And so then I think, yeah, it's just about, I think, taking a step back and really saying, okay, I know this is frustrating. Why am I frustrated? What would I do differently? Who can I pull in to help me? And kind of coming back at it with a new energy every day.
Yeah, bouncing back, it's also about being realistic about your setup and not trying to fake the fact that it's not a good day or that it's not going well. And going back to building trust, I think sharing that openly and not trying to mask it, I think it builds a lot of trust with people around you to know that these are difficult times or there's a difficult situation and you're kind of going through it, and tomorrow you'll probably come back feeling more energized and better about how you can solve that situation. I think being genuine about those hard moments also helps build trust, like you said. So it's part of the journey. Yes. And I do have a question about, because you shared all of these different pieces of advice and also, I'd say, layers to your career. You also mentioned in the beginning of the interview the fact that you did travel around and now you're based in Copenhagen. You've been here for a couple of years, but you traveled around. You had an MBA, worked in the US and Europe across for a couple of years. How do you build an international career in this way? What do you advise our listeners that think, this is the coolest thing, I want to build an international career too? Because you do have to change every few years your mindset. You need to learn from scratch. You use curiosity, but you also need to build up a network from zero, right?
Yes. So I think, of course, there's also some logistical restrictions. So I'm in the fortunate position to have both a US and an EU passport. So I also have not gone through the process of gaining a work visa, which I think is, its own adventure and can add additional stress to, the workplace and your job. But I think, for sure, I think you need to be strategic about it, right? So as a prime example, I've always used education as a way to move because it's an easy way for you to build a network and establish yourself in a country. It's really hard, right, to graduate in the US and find a job in London and then with no contacts move to another country. And so I've always kind of used available resources, be it, okay, I'm going to study in this country, and then that naturally leads to finding a job in that country. Or even at INSEAD, it was a very natural transition because, it's based in Europe and there's a lot of recruiters from across Europe that come to find, MBA students there. And when I moved between London and New York, it was with my existing employer. And for instance, I also know that BCG has similar opportunities. And so that's also a way, right, to move to a new country. And being very, I think, intentional about that. There's a saying when you do your MBA that you can change your geography, you can change your industry, and you can change your function. And usually when I reach a point in my job where I say, okay, something is not working, or I'm not learning enough, or I'm not being challenged enough, I go back to these three things and I think, okay, like which one of these three is kind of bothering me right now? And what do I want to change? Do I want, a new geography? Am I actually super happy with the city I live in? And I actually just want a new adventure. And what am I looking for in that adventure? And I will also say that it's really hard, especially as you get older, because it's not necessarily easy to move to a new country and make friends when you're 30. And, your ability to enter a new environment and kind of establish yourself and build relationships, at least in my experience and from the research I've read around friendships, becomes harder over time. And also if you have kids, right, moving them around to different schools is also difficult. So I think I, tried to use my 20s to the fullest, which was, okay, this is a time when I can move and experience a lot of different things and really try things out for myself, right? And just saying, okay, I lived in Singapore for a bit, and at the time I thought, okay, maybe I want to move to Singapore. And then I visited some countries in Europe and was trying to decide where I wanted to move to after my MBA. So I think, looking back, it feels like a very straight, linear path that now makes sense to me. But I would probably say that at the time it was a bit chaotic and opportunistic, and okay, like these are the resources I have available in front of me, and this is the passports I have, so I'm just going to make do, right, with the pieces that I have available. And I think, now I probably am a lot more settled, and I'm really enjoying, knowing that I'm going to be in a place for a little bit longer and kind of building those relationships and that network, knowing that there's no end date in sight, which is also very, very nice.
Absolutely. And when it comes to, I really wanna take this advice from you. Wrapping up, you've had all of these experiences. You've also reflected a lot on your journey. It's clear that you've worked with a coach, also from the way that you phrase your reflections. And I'm very happy that you've mentioned we met through some of those endeavors. I think it's still the highlight of my personal growth, the fact that we've worked with a coach and learned so much. But when it comes to one piece of advice that you would leave our listeners, they listen and they say you have a great setup, you've explained very well what you do now. What would you believe, the most important piece of advice, drawing from your experiences and all of the different episodes of your career, when it comes to building a successful career across industry? What is one thing that you think people should remember?
I think what people should remember is that it's very easy to put people in boxes. And so when you try to change boxes, it's always harder, but not impossible. And so sometimes it feels like, okay, this job requires that I know how to code, or this job, requires that I have an MBA. And it's very easy to get hung up on, okay, like this is the box and I don't fit into it. But actually most jobs and careers are very fluid, and actually what you need is a great mindset, ability to drive project, ability to manage stakeholders. Usually the things that make you successful are not what is on the paper, it's what you bring to the role. And also almost everything can be learned. If you're 35 and all of a sudden you decide you want to be an engineer, there's 5 or 6 organizations that can teach you how to code. And so it's never too late to put yourself in a new box. I think life is about discovering more about yourself. And then ultimately when you decide, okay, I actually now think this fits what I want, it's about taking the chances to actually, build up your personality, your profile, so that you fit the box.
Fantastic. And I wanna wrap this interview by also highlighting what we are doing together to, help and share information and examples of how you can build a successful career. So together we decided to host and build an event together with Monta. And you have been a key sponsor in this setup because you also really wanted to bring Family to a larger audience, and we're very thankful for that. And very soon, in a few weeks, which will be in March 2024, we're going to have a event that will focus on charting your course and building a successful startup career in Denmark. We're both based in Denmark, so we are keeping it local in terms of the event because we want to meet people face to face and have a very interesting networking event. And I want to highlight it here because this is one of the opportunities that we work closely together with our guests and our partners to create this context and stage for women and allies to come together and actually discuss opportunities for successful careers. Our mission is to empower women to build fulfilling careers and map out their way to a fulfilling career. And so if you listen to this and you're based in Denmark, in March, we will host an event together with Monta, and we're going to have a panel of experts, both from the startup world, investment, and also senior leaders from startups and scale-ups that have been successful in growing their business, and discussing that career setup that we keep inviting guests to share. And I hope that we will see many of you there. I'm really excited about that, Violeta.
Yes, me too.
Super excited. Great. Okay, I want to wrap up by asking you the final 5 fire questions. So these are questions that Violeta will answer with some recommendations from her experience and her favorite books and movies and so on.
Yeah.
So if you were to choose one book that has profoundly influenced your approach to business and marketing, or in general a book that you think everyone should read, what would be that book?
So I think a book that profoundly impacted me was the book called Guns, Germs, and Steel. So not necessarily related to business, but it talks about, the history. It talks about history through a very different lens, which is, the amount of resources that certain countries had and why Europe became such a superpower compared to, why didn't Africa develop at the same rate as Europe? In terms of like technology. And I think it just really put into perspective for me, like that critical thinking of like challenging assumptions, even challenging things right around like the way history has been told to you. And yeah, it just really opened my eyes in many ways.
Fantastic. If you were to share the best piece of advice that you have ever received, what would that be?
Just give it a try and get it done.
Give it a try. Yes, that's a fantastic one. Who is your role model, and why are you admiring them?
So I would definitely say my grandma, who I was named after, and I think she's my role model because she is equally tough and equally sweet. Like one of the most, like opinionated, hard-headed people, right, who always does things on her own, and at the same time she is so incredibly social. Like every time I go and visit her, like her phone rings more times than me, and so like I'm like, you have more friends at 88 than I do. And it's so impressive how she is like such a social and warm person.
Fantastic. If you were to pursue a completely different career, what would that be?
I would probably go back to my arts background and maybe do something like graphic design. Yeah, I would love to make logos or something like that. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Cool. And our last question is, if you could swap places and roles with someone for a day, who would it be and what would you expect to achieve?
I would probably switch places with somebody not in the business world. I think I would love to switch places maybe with somebody who runs a non-for-profit and like really going to experience making a social change or a difference in a country that I know nothing about. So I don't have a specific person, in mind.
That's great. But thank you for sharing, because I think it also highlights some of your, let's say, other interests. I'm very happy you mentioned your grandmother. I'm very happy you mentioned your arts background, because I think it just adds to your versatile background and also interests. And I'm really, really happy that we got to do this today for people to know more about you, and also to get to highlight your great accomplishment, but also how much we admire you as a role model. So thank you so much, Violeta, for coming here today. I hope you had fun, and I hope
Yes.
you enjoyed being part of this interview.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anna.
And thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview, and stay tuned for more interviews with inspiring female role models.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of FemLead Podcast. Share the news with your friends and follow us on social media at FemLead Podcast everywhere.